Have you ever found yourself in the dark trying to fix something? Then you know how hard it is to do some jobs without light in the right place. That's why you need the Craftsman driver light, available only from Sears. The driver light is a screwdriver that focuses a beam of light right where you need it. It allows you to see what you're doing, even in tight, dark spaces, without shadows getting in the way or juggling a flashlight. The driver light has a magnetic shaft, which holds the bits firmly in place and allows you to change quickly to the one you need. The Craftsman driver light comes with 2 sizes of slotted bits, 2 Phillips bits, and 5 socket bits, all in a convenient storage case. At $19.99, it's a great value and makes a terrific gift. The Craftsman driver light is such a versatile tool, you can use it for all kinds of jobs. In hard-to-reach places like under the kitchen sink, on hard-to-see furniture assembly, appliances, or any project that needs extra lighting. There are so many jobs you'll want to use the driver light for, like under-the-hood car repairs, computers, and home electronics, or whenever there's no good light source available. You'll also appreciate the driver light when you're away from home. Keep an extra one with you wherever you go. The driver light is a heavy-duty Craftsman tool that can generate 35% more turning force than a standard screwdriver. Yet its durable, impact-resistant handle is comfortable to hold and use. It works with 2 AAA batteries that are easy to replace and features a recessed on-off switch so you won't accidentally turn off the light in the middle of a job. The driver light is made in America and, like other Craftsman hand tools, is guaranteed forever. It's another great example of how Craftsman makes anything possible. Light up your dark jobs with the Craftsman driver light. Order a driver light today.
Have your Sears or other credit card ready and call 1-800-943-8448 to order your Craftsman driver light with 2 sizes of slotted bits, 2 Phillips bits, 5 socket bits, and storage case for only $19.99 plus shipping and handling. That's 1-800-943-8448. Call now.
Back to Washington now, where Representative Sheila Jackson Lee has the floor.
He didn't know about Monica Lewinsky had been subpoenaed in the Jones case when he knew it through Mr. Jordan. He reaffirmed what he said in the deposition, that the Monica Lewinsky affidavit was truthful when he said, when it said no sexual relations. There's a whole litany of so-called accusations. And so we don't know which are the ones that are stated in this. And the only thing we have is the suggestion that there were some witnesses who heard her say things of which they are corroborating. That is the same way if you be accused of perjury and the people who are accusing you, or who are the people who will be the witnesses, have all been talking to each other. This gives us no basis. And I think that if we're relying upon language that is in the rule of law, perjurious, then you are owed, if you will, the protection of the Fifth Amendment, which is notice. And you're also owed the common law protection of Bronson, the case that says that if the witness is unresponsive or evasive, that is not per se perjurious. So if you're relying on the fact that the president said, I don't recall, or I can't remember, then it's not per se perjurious. And I think that's where we fall on very weak ground, Mr. Chairman, in this instance.
The gentlelady's time has expired. Who is next? Mr. Shabbat.
Thank you. You know, the argument is being made by some of the folks on the other side of the aisle here is that the article of impeachment is not specific enough. And we've been debating this issue for about 2 hours now. Perhaps we need some guidance here. Perhaps we need to find a member of the House of Representatives who both sides respect, somebody who was actually around back in 1974 when the Watergate hearings were going on and Richard Nixon was being investigated. Somebody both sides respect. Now, who could that maybe be? How about Charlie Rangel? Somebody I think we all agree is an exemplary member of Congress. Here's what Charlie Rangel had to say about specifics back in 1974 in the Nixon matter. If we got bogged down with specifics before the House of Representatives has worked its will, perhaps we would not give the general recommendation to the House that it rightfully deserves. It is not our constitutional responsibility to impeach the president, but merely to report to the House. So it seems to me that we should not be talking about specifics, but give the maximum amount of information to the House of Representatives so that they can deal with the problem constitutionally. And that's what Charlie Rangel said back in 1974. Now, we've heard numerous times from the president's defenders that the sexual details of this case are salacious and distasteful, etc. And I agree, they are distasteful. Now, they're distasteful because of the conduct of the President of the United States. That's why they're so distasteful. And we've dealt with them in excruciating detail in Mr. Schipper's report, in the Starr report, and I don't think we need to go through all those salacious details here again today. I'd prefer that we not do that. You know, we've reviewed 60,000 pages of documents, 16 boxes of evidence. We've listened to many, many witnesses testify, a significant number of them appearing on behalf of the President. We've heard from history professors, legal experts, even perjurers. We've watched grand jury testimony. We've watched deposition videotapes. We've read transcripts, hundreds, even thousands of pages. And it all boils down to this. The President lied before a grand jury. He lied at a deposition when he was under oath. He waved his finger at the American people and lied to them. He lied to his staff. He lied to his cabinet. He lied so many times in so many forums, it's really hard to keep track of it all. Again, the specific details of all the lies were dealt with in great specificity in the Starr report and in Mr. Schipper's presentations before this very committee. The articles of impeachment are in fact comprehensive and will provide the Senate an opportunity to conduct a fair and appropriate trial without tying their hands. While some would try to bring consideration of these articles to a grinding halt or drag us through the muck, I don't think we need to get into the salacious details over and over again. We've had months to review the evidence provided in sworn testimony by many witnesses, and we've listened to the President's people, we've listened to the President on his videotape, we've listened to the independent counsel's report. I believe the facts are clear and convincing. The President lied under oath. He committed perjury before a grand jury. The President gave false and misleading testimony before the grand jury regarding his contact with a subordinate federal employee who was a witness in a civil rights suit against him. Particularly telling, I believe, was Mr. Schipper's testimony yesterday as it related to the President's claim that the President was not paying attention when he allowed his attorney, Mr. Bennett, to present an affidavit to the court that he knew was false. We all know, the evidence is clear, that he knew it was false. The President's videotape testimony in the sexual harassment case demonstrate that the President, in fact, was paying clear attention. He was looking directly at his attorney, Mr. Bennett. If I got any time, I will, but I'm almost out of time. Perjury cannot be taken lightly. It's a direct assault on our justice system. Ignoring this President's lies and deceit would set a terrible precedent for the future, for future presidents, for future people who testify in courts throughout this country, and to our nation's children. You know, I hear over and over again, we've got to do it for the children. And unfortunately, I believe for the children of this nation, this President has to be impeached. And with the little time I have left, I'll yield to Mr. Barr, and I'd ask for an additional 2 minutes so I can yield to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Watt, who has been very generous in yielding time to other members today.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman, in the event that the words of their former colleague, Mr. Rangel, do not suffice for those who believe that we are doing something without historic precedent in moving forward with articles of impeachment, while they do not contain the full range of all the details the other side would like, do in fact place a president on sufficient notice for him to prepare a defense, which, as Mr. Graham already pointed out, he has already done. I would point also to testimony in the Nixon case on the same day, in which, as Mr. Shabbat pointed out, Mr. Rangel spoke, and this is from the lead counsel for the then majority, Mr. John Doerr. Quote, Mr. Chairman, in my judgment, it is not necessary to be totally specific, and I think this article of impeachment meets the test of specificity. There will be a report submitted to the Congress with respect to this article if the committee chooses to vote this article, and behind that report will be the summary of information as well as all of the material that was presented to this committee. I close quote, and let that stand as a very sound historical and legal precedent for the precise language and the sufficiency thereof of this article of impeachment. I thank the gentleman from Ohio.
And I yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thanks, gentlemen, for yielding. There was just one aspect of what you said that that really troubled me. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You made a reference to not tying the Senate's hands when this goes to the Senate. Is the gentleman saying that once this gets to the Senate can add additional perjurious statements? They can just do whatever they want to once we get over there?
Reclaiming my time, there's so many perjurious statements in the 60,000 pages and the previous evidence that we've already had before this committee. I don't think they're going to have to look for additional statements of perjury.
Well, but the question I'm asking...
I'll yield back.
The question I'm asking is, are you saying that they could go outside of the perjurious statements that you have specified?
Reclaiming my time, is the gentleman conceding that they're perjurious statements?
Beg pardon?
You just referred to them as the perjurious statements. Are you conceding that they are perjurious statements?
No, I'm conceding that you have alleged that they are perjurious statements, and I've heard a lot of allegations on your side about what is perjurious, and I acknowledge that. The question I'm asking is, if you haven't specified them, or if you do specify them, would the Senate have the right to go beyond what you have specified?
Reclaiming my time, it's our responsibility as a House and right now as this committee.
Breaking in very briefly to let you know this, Fox News has learned that House Democratic leaders have urged the President of the United States not to speak about this issue until he returns from his trip overseas. He will be leaving tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock Eastern Time. Will return, I believe, on Wednesday of next week. So if there is a speech on this issue, it would come there. We are approaching the top of the hour and almost time for us to take a commercial break. Following that break, Catherine Cryer's in to lead the discussion and keep you updated on breaking news. I'm Shepard Smith at Fox News headquarters in New York. This is the Fair and Balanced Alternative. You're watching the Fox News Channel.
Enjoyable weekend, avoid things like alarm clocks. Instead, grab a big Grand Cinnamon Roll.
What better way to unwind than by enjoying a hot, fresh Grand Cinnamon Roll?
They're not just big, they're grands. Woohoo!
What makes the new Wall Vision 180 so revolutionary? Let's ask an expert.
Well, foremost are its distinctive illuminary properties.
What he means is only the Vision 180 has a built-in trimming light.
Plus a 180-degree vertiginous syncopator.
The head rotates for easier, more precise trimming.
Not to mention its 7 trimming positions are steel blades with...
It's just better. The Wall Vision 180 Beard and Mustache Trimmer. It's the science
of style.
Did you know harsh winter weather can leave even unexposed skin itchy and dry? Did you know moisturizers aren't always up to the challenge of itchy, dry skin? That's why there's new Cortisone 10 Plus.
Among these, only Cortisone 10 Plus has 10 moisturizers like aloe and vitamins, plus the power of Cortisone 10 to stop itch and help heal.
So for itchy patches of dry skin, even eczema or psoriasis, try new Cortisone 10 Plus.
Merry Christmas.
Peter!
Merry Christmas.
Everyone's asleep.
Shh, I know how to wake them up. Come on.
Peter!
Oh, you're home.
I missed you, Mom. Happy holidays from Folgers.
What's the real fun of cookie making? Decorating. So leap to the fun part faster with Pillsbury. Roll it out, cut it out, then have some holiday fun with Pillsbury Sugar Cookie Dough, the fast way to a big finish.
Ho-ho!
Welcome back. As debate continues on the first article of impeachment, we return to the committee room where Chairman Hyde is continuing discussions.
Civil deposition, they can be fined and punished in the civil courts. If someone commits a criminal offense, they can be punished in a criminal court. The president is not above the law. We're talking about a third thing, a third punishment. Not civil punishment or criminal punishment, because that upholds the rule of law in the civil and criminal courts. We're talking about whether treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors have occurred. Now, is the standard somehow expanded so that it's not just treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors, but lack of good character, such that while we don't have clear and convincing evidence, since there was no fact witness and intelligent folks have argued equally, what happens when the argument is equal and no fact witness is presented? Does the prosecution win? We declare the president guilty? I don't think so. We're talking about the impeachment of a president of the United States, let alone any American. And when you have no fact witnesses to help you decide the arguments that have neutralized one another from competent attorneys, I believe the score is 0-0, and the accused is not convicted, and that clear and convincing evidence has not been proven that they should be either sent for trial to the grand jury. If I may have one more additional minute, Mr. Chairman.
Surely.
You know, the founders of our country in the Federalist Paper 65 said they were very concerned about one political party in the Congress using the power of impeachment to remove an opposing president, the president of an opposing party. And so they set the bar for impeachment of that president very high. They rejected the notion that perhaps one of the standards, in addition to treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors, should be failure of good behavior. They rejected that notion. Too low a bar. They rejected the notion of...
Gentlemen, yield.
May I just finish my point? They rejected the notion of maladministration. And I believe that if we step back and look at what is now an article of impeachment for the third time in our 200-year history, do we find that a clear and convincing standard of proof has been met for a high crime or misdemeanor, or are we befuddled by the lawyers' talk, which has neutralized one another, and we say, why didn't the accuser call a single fact witness to support his charges? We don't have to speculate. He didn't. Judge Starr didn't, the majority didn't, those who want to impeach the president didn't, and we as the jury, if you will, are left 0-0, and we must say the burden of proof to impeach a sitting United States president.
Will gentlemen yield now?
I will yield.
I ask unanimous consent the gentleman be given one additional minute.
Without objection.
Gentleman from New Jersey, first of all, we're not the jury. The jury is the Senate if it gets that far. And we should not be determining what the weight of the evidence should be. We should be determining if there is sufficient evidence to accuse the president through articles of impeachment.
May I reclaim my time?
Secondly, you make the point about Federalist 65, and that's been very frequently quoted. Federalist 65 was written before the 12th Amendment was ratified. Before the 12th Amendment was ratified, the vice president was always the presidential candidate of the losing party. And after Aaron Burr undermined all of Thomas Jefferson's proposals, the 12th Amendment was proposed and ratified so that the vice president would be of the same party as the president.
Reclaiming my time, let me just say this. No one would deny that there is a burden of proof upon anyone who wishes to impeach a sitting United States president. The question is, what is the burden of proof? And I think it's fairly unanimous amongst the scholars that the burden of proof is clear and convincing evidence. So that's the standard. And then the question is, in the duel and the battle, the neutralizing battle of lawyers who have argued equally well that you can draw inferences to support the president's conduct so that it would not be a lie or perjury, and those who say you could draw inferences to make it a lie or perjury, that they neutralize one another. And the failure of the accusers, those supporting the president's impeachment, to call a single fact witness is powerful and determinative.
Time has expired. The gentleman from Utah, Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a couple of comments and then yield some of my time to my colleague from Arkansas. First of all, I think I need to respond to a couple of things my friend from New Jersey just said. In fact, the president is probably the one person in America who is above the law for a period of time. While he's president, I think the weight of constitutional authority suggests that he can't be prosecuted. This is the one place where it is more important to maintain our political hygiene, that is, through impeachment, than it is to have the supremacy of the criminal law take place. Secondly, I'd like to just make a couple of comments on the distinction between perjury and perjurious, and I don't mean to speak down to people, particularly in my district, who understand the role of government and the different activities of the various branches and who know what's going on here in this proceeding. Everybody agrees this is not a criminal proceeding, period. That's not even an issue. We're also not dealing with a crime here. Perjury is a legal term of art that relates to the criminal law, and with it come certain particulars. What we've talked about here is perjurious, which means in the nature of perjury. I can't understand my colleagues on the other side of the aisle making a big deal out of the difference between perjury and perjurious, or trying to make perjurious perjury, because what the American people really care about here is the nature of the acts of our president. They know he's not going to go to jail. They know this is not criminal. We don't need to lecture them about this not being criminal. What they care about is, did he do things that would undermine our constitutional system of government? And with that, let me yield the balance of my time to my colleague from Arkansas.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I just wanted to comment on a couple things. We continually hear a lack of specificity, and of course I went through in my earlier statements Q&A, question and answer in the grand jury testimony that are alleged perjurious statements that support the articles. But if you look back, and I think this is important, and Mr. Goodlatte referenced it, that in the drafting of the articles of impeachment on Richard Nixon, and I went through the other historicals from Hastings to Nixon, Judge Nixon, Judge Claiborne, anytime that there is an article that is drafted relating to false statements, relating to perjury statements, in the same form that this is presented in this case. And so we're following the historical pattern there, and I think that's important. It's been said that, well, the president did not give false answers because they're literally true. And I just wanted to reference a case that came down within the last month. A 3-judge panel of the appellate court gave an opinion that a defendant can be found guilty of perjury when he knew what the question meant and gave knowingly untruthful and materially misleading answers in response.
As Congressman Hutchison continues his remarks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
You know, these days lots of deodorants are talking antibacterial protection. It's not about that at all. It's about whose deodorant lasts longer. High endurance. Old Spice guarantees it. If you want odor protection that really lasts, High Endurance exceeds the need.
For an enjoyable weekend, avoid things like alarm clocks. Instead, grab a big Grand cinnamon roll.
What better way to unwind than by enjoying a hot, fresh Grand cinnamon roll?
They're not just big, they're Grands. Woohoo!
148 million people on the internet. 67,000 more jump in every day. With so many people doing so much business, no wonder it's sometimes so unpredictable. And that's where we come in. We make the things that make the internet faster, more reliable, everything you always imagined it could be. Lucent Technologies. We make the things that make communications work.
For one of the richest sources of vitamins and minerals, people have come to Walgreens for nearly 100 years. Now, they can count on us for herbal supplements as well. Same high quality, new lower prices.
Top quality glucosamine chondroitin, now available at your nearby Walgreens.
Chocolate milk? This isn't ordinary chocolate milk, it's rich chocolate Ovaltine. Compare the labels. It's got vitamins. Hershey's syrup has none. When it comes to nutrition, Ovaltine beats Hershey's syrup hands down. For us, it's rich chocolate Ovaltine.
More Ovaltine, please!
Need fast itch relief? Did you know there's a cream that brings fast itch relief to irritating winter itch? A cream with 2 proven medicated itch fighters from a leader in itch relief for nearly 100 years. It's Gold Bond, maximum strength Gold Bond medicated cream, fast itch relief.
As the impeachment debate continues, the fate of a president remains in question. As both sides rest their case, will the House vote to impeach? Stay with Fox News Channel for continuing coverage of the impeachment debate. The president's men and women have spoken. Now decision time. If it does come down to a full House vote, is the deck stacked against the president? And even if he's impeached, what are the odds of conviction? Get the latest buzz this weekend with the Beltway Boys. 'Cause in Washington, there's never a dull moment.
Welcome back to our special live coverage of the impeachment vote. Now, joining me once again from our Los Angeles bureau, Deborah Rich, KFI radio talk show host, and in our Washington bureau, GOPAC GOPAC political director Peter Roth. Welcome to you both. Deborah, let me begin.
Good afternoon, Judge Carr.
Good afternoon. Deborah, what do you think this is doing in terms of public viewing? Because obviously a lot of this is for the American people. Are you getting any reaction?
I'm afraid that I am, and the reaction is nobody cares. People still are not invested in this. And I don't know if it's a question of learned helplessness, because after the last election, people felt like, gee, maybe if I do vote, maybe my voice will be heard. And apparently their voices aren't being heard, so they've tuned out completely.
Well, Peter, give me an idea about this debate, because it's my assumption that the Democrats would like to see very narrow provisions drawn here, so there's very little wiggle room if this were to go to the Senate. The Republicans are looking for a relatively broad impeachment article on this first perjury count to encompass any or all of the statements that may be found in the record.
I think that's probably a fair description, although I think that the Democrats are also interested in spending as much time as they can arguing about each article to further run out the clock and get us farther and farther and farther away from the incredibly powerful statements that David Shippers made to the committee last night, where he laid out in a very factual, very unemotional way exactly what it was the President of the United States did to get us to this point and why those behaviors were impeachable.
Why would that be effective, though? Because, in fact, this particular body that's going to be voting will remember that, and the public may not, as Deborah is saying, vest themselves in this until it gets in front of the House at the end of next week.
I think it's important because this is a vote of conscience, and although we have heard now the story of Congressman Lincoln Diaz-Balart of Florida, who may have been threatened by a White House Congressional Affairs staffer vis-a-vis Hurricane Mitch relief in exchange for a vote against impeachment, that this is a vote of conscience. I mean, this is one of the most serious things that the Congress can do, and we hope that they're all taking it seriously. I believe that all of the Republicans certainly are. They're looking for their truth. They're looking for the answers. Did the president do all these things? I think the general consensus now is that he did. Are those things impeachable? I think that you can make a very strong argument that they are. Should the president be impeached? Does the severity of impeachment measure up to the things the president did? Do we need to do this to the country? I mean, there are a lot of very heavy, very weighty issues.
Absolutely.
And Shippers put them out pretty well yesterday.
Well, Peter, Deborah, I'd like to ask both of you to stay with us. We're going to go back to the hearings, but before we do, I want to real quickly address something you brought up, and that was the issue about Congressman Diaz-Balart from Florida. Apparently, the White House has responded to charges this congressman may have been intimidated regarding any funding for Central America and relief efforts, possibly in the state of Florida. And apparently, the White House said while this congressman did get a routine call to let him know about the Rose Garden appearance by the president to address this, he was told that Charles Ruff, Attorney Charles Ruff for the White House, was available to speak with the congressman if he had any questions about the impeachment matter. The White House apparently is categorically rejecting any suggestion the legislative office, quote, pressured the congressional aide in any way, shape, or form, period, end quote. That is the response, apparently, from White House officials. Let's go back now to the hearing where I think Representative Tom Barrett is still speaking.
All over this country, it doesn't apply to the President of the United States. The person that all of us agree should not be above the law, but the person that apparently some people believe can be below the law. Now, I also, as the last person to speak, you got a little time on your hands. So I was able to get the indictment in the latest Webb-Hubbell case. This is the one that was just filed less than a month ago. It's the third indictment filed by the independent counsel against Mr. Hubbell. I won't go into that, but I think it's instructive for us because there is a count of perjury in here, and there are several counts of making false statements. It's pretty much consistent with what we've been hearing today. I heard a number of my colleagues on the other side talk about the Nixon case, and in the Nixon case, Judge Nixon case, that there were references. Mr. Scott said there were references to the false statements. And in here, in the indictment against Mr. Hubbell, where there are allegations that he made false statements, the document actually states what the false statements were, and then states in truth and in fact the defendant then well knew each of these statements was false. But it also has a count of perjury. And there, it actually quotes the question. It has the question, and it has the answer. Now, why does it do that? It does that because the words are the crime. And a defendant...
As Congressman Barrett continues to argue the specificity needed for this perjury count, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey, little brother, what you eating? Condensed soup. You know, chicken and stars used to be my favorite, and then I learned to ride a two-wheeler. Come on, you're an adult now. There's a better tasting soup, Progresso chicken noodle, with all white meat chicken, bigger veggies, and seasonings with some real zip. See the difference?
Good stuff.
There's hope for you yet. Now let's talk about this shirt.
What?
Discover the better taste of Progresso.
Some things can never be taught in a classroom. You won't find them in any textbook. And with Fixodent's long-lasting hold, you'll be ready, no matter where the lesson takes you. For long-lasting hold, Fixodent, and forget it.
This holiday season, after years of sacrifice, these families are opening something they never had before. The door to their very own home.
It's all in how you use it.
You still have your pay stubs from your college job?
Why would they need that?
You never know.
You're in awfully early this morning.
Good morning.
At Countrywide Home Loans, we've put our branch managers in charge of the entire home loan process.
Honey, I could sure use those statements.
Still looking.
We have no loan committee.
Hi, it's Peter Mooney, just checking in again.
Well, Peter, I think I have everything I need from you.
Are you sure? If you want me to, I can just...
So with people in every Countrywide branch with the power to say yes, we're very fast.
So when do you think we'll hear? This week?
Peter.
It's okay, I don't want to rush the loan committee.
Why don't we hear from them now?
What?
I am the loan committee.
Really?
Your loan is approved.
Oh. That was quick.
With rates so low, it's time to call Countrywide to refinance or buy your new home. Call 800-EASY-877 or ask your real estate agent about a branch near you. Countrywide. Easy, really.
Welcome back to our special live coverage of the impeachment vote. The congressmen and women continuing to argue about the content of Article 1, still on Article 1, and whether charges of perjury must be very specific as to which statements are referred to, or whether it can be very generic and simply address the whole record. Congressman Barney Frank is speaking at this moment. Let's listen in.
And the president stands accused of committing perjury with regard to 1, 2, 3, or 4, or more. You've taken an article of impeachment and made it a multiple choice test. Shouldn't you have, Mr. Chairman, or Article 5 to keep with the dignity of this? Shouldn't there be 5, all of the above? I mean, here's what it will say. The president provided perjurious, false, and misleading testimony to the grand jury concerning 1 or more of the following. So maybe it was 1, but maybe it was 2. Or maybe it was 3. Maybe it was 3 and 4. Maybe it was 1, 2, and 4. I am baffled by this. You've had quite a few months here. Is there no consensus among you on which of these? Once again, I think I see what we have. By the way, it seemed to me that my friend from Arkansas gave an inaccurate response to the excellent point of the gentleman from Virginia about the particularities of the Judge Nixon case. As the gentleman from Virginia said, in the Judge Nixon case, it said he made a false statement by denying he had talked to the DA to get him to drop the case about his partner's son. A very different thing, by the way, than which body part you touched. In the Judge Nixon case, it was perjury, in which a federal judge denied trying to fix a case of a drug dealer who was his partner's son by going to a state judge. But it didn't say, actually, if the Judge Nixon case followed your model, it would have said false statement concerning the nature and details of his conversation with another judge. It would have left out the gravamen of the charge. But what you're really trying to do now is, I don't know, what is this, the shell game? I guess that's the question. Under which P is the impeachment?
Will the gentleman yield?
Is it under number 1, or is it under number 2? Or maybe it's under 3 and 2, or 4 and 1, or 2 and 3. And how are you going to defend it? I mean, I have to say, the notion, and I hope this doesn't go anywhere, and I hope we don't bog the country down, but I'm almost intrigued here. I want to see Chief Justice Rehnquist sitting there while the senators try to guess under which P you have concealed the impeachment. The point is that you ought to be making specific charges. And what you now have is, you're going to seriously argue that the president should be charged with 1 or more of the following and not 2? Now, I understand a kind of reluctance on the part of the majority, to live up to their responsibility. Because I think when you vote for a resolution that says, president has done terrible things and ought to be thrown out of office, that's what you're voting for. And to say that you're voting for that, but you don't really mean it. I mean, we're just the piano players. We're just sending it upstairs. And then the Senate will decide whether it's true or not true. That absolute avoidance of responsibility is compounded when now you won't even say which of the ones you care about, which are the ones you mean. So we're simply going to say, hey, look, we found 4 things. We looked through the Star Report. We didn't really like those too much. They were too trivial. We went through the Shippers Report. That's pretty wide-ranging. That's got a lot. We're going to pick 4. We'll describe them vaguely. We'll throw them out there, and we'll tell you 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 2, or 3 are there. And you, the Senate, figure it out. And by the way, haven't we done a wonderful job? Haven't we been responsible members of Congress? We've gone through here, and we've thrown that mix on the table. I'll yield to the ranking member.
Now, we spent 2 hours begging for more specificity, and now, as a result of that plea, we now get an amendment that adds to more generality and makes it more difficult to become
What we got was,
accurate.
of course, more ambiguity, and that reinforces the substantive point. We're not interested in specificity for its own sake. We are talking here about how the issue is framed. It is the most important issue possible. Do we undo the election? Do we throw the duly elected president out of office? And we are asking that this issue be framed. And if you are saying that the President of the United States should be thrown out of office because, having acknowledged that he had a sexual relationship, he misstated the date by 3 months of when it started, and he did not give details about what he touched, then say so. But do not take refuge in confusion, obscurity, and now ambiguous obscurity. You list 4 general categories without any specificity, and then you don't even say which ones you stand behind. This is an abdication of responsibility that is absolutely breathtaking on a matter of such centrality to our democracy.
Absolutely. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Sensenbrenner.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're seeing a continuation of legal hair splitting, albeit quite a bit more humorous than that which we heard from either the President's counsel or Mr. Lowell yesterday. This merely takes care of a drafting error in the articles of impeachment that were put before us. And what it says is that you only have to prove up one kind of false statement when it goes to trial. Now, you know, the question I think is one false statement enough to warrant the impeachment and removal from office of the President? I answer that question yes, because one false statement is one lie. I think that what the other side is trying to do with all of their humor and have everybody laugh about what the Chief Justice of the United States would have to rule on is to set up to make an argument that you've got to talk about all or prove all four kinds of false statements. That's not the intent of the article of impeachment, and Articles 3 and 4 I think have the one or more of the following statements in. Mr. Graham will have one relative to Article 2. You know, I think that, you know, really what they're trying to do is to laugh over something that's a drafting error. This amendment simply corrects it. I yield the gentleman from Georgia.
I thank the gentleman. If I might inquire of the gentleman from Wisconsin, is it not standard prosecutorial procedure to use this precise language in the drafting of indictments?
Absolutely.
Will the gentleman yield to me?
Gentleman from California want me to yield to him?
I do. I thank the gentleman. Actually, before my colleagues on the left get terribly exercised about this, I will tell them that this language is being inserted at their request. It was the request of the Democrats that we followed the Rodino models for impeachment. This was not language that we invented. This is the language that the Democrats used in Article 1 and Article 2 of the impeachment articles against Richard Nixon. The difference is when they drafted the articles against President Nixon, they had broad categories of impeachable offenses. It was either or perjury or obstruction of justice. We have narrowed it much more definitively against President Clinton than they did against President Nixon. So no, to my friend from Massachusetts, I did not get the idea from Monty Hall or Let's Make a Deal. I got it from those venerable Democrats who preceded us in the impeachment inquiry that you requested we follow as a model. The gentleman from Wisconsin yield? I yield back.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Congressman Frank has the floor, and we have a commercial break. We'll be right back.
For an enjoyable weekend, avoid things like alarm clocks. Instead, grab a big Grand Cinnamon Roll.
What better way to unwind than by enjoying a hot, fresh Grand Cinnamon Roll?
They're not just big, they're grands.
You give your all, that's what moms are for. Here's a way of giving them more. Moms like you, choose Jif. Choose Jif.
Creamy Jif hot roasted peanuts to get more out of every one. Then it's sealed warm to bring you more fresh roasted peanut taste. More than any other leading creamy brand.
Jif's got more of what you're loving it for. Moms like you, choose Jif. Choose Jif.
Flat TV from Philips.
Is your tissue making her cold's red nose worse blow after blow?
Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry. The more I wipe, the worse this tissue feels.
No regular tissue soothes better than Puffs Plus, not even the other national brand. It's the most soothing Puffs ever. An incredibly soft tissue with lotion, with aloe and vitamin E.
Wow, that's magic. Can you feel the lotion? Maybe next time your nose won't get so red.
That was magic.
Puffs Plus. It feels better because it soothes better.
What's the real fun of cookie making? Decorating. So leap to the fun part faster with Pillsbury. Roll it out, cut it out, then have some holiday fun with Pillsbury Sugar Cookie Dough, the fast way to a big finish.
Power.
want to make the right choices, we give you the power to decide for yourself. Power. 24 hours, 7 days a week. Nobody gives you more original live programming. The power of news to keep you up to date. Shows that go in-depth. Issues in context. Topics that matter to you. The power of Fox News Channel. News and information, fair and balanced. The most powerful name in news. Fox News Channel. We report, you decide.
Welcome back. Our coverage of the impeachment hearings continues, but before we go back to the hearing room, let's check in with Carl Cameron on Capitol Hill. A lot going on behind the scenes. Carl, a question I had. There were a lot of rumors this morning when the president took to the Rose Garden that he might make a statement today. He might say something before a vote in the House. What about all of this?
Well, last night, some White House aides were circulating a draft proposal for a speech that the president might give. An offering of contrition to the nation designed really less for the American public as it would be for about a dozen, perhaps as many as 24 moderate, wavering, mostly Northeast Republicans. That's the core group of undecided voters that the administration has realized they must win over to have them oppose articles of impeachment if the president is to avoid impeachment. And what we are certain of is that what was circulated by the administration last night is not anything that the president is going to say. But what has happened is the very real possibility that the president might decide that it would perhaps help his case to speak to the nation and show this contrition, admit that he's done wrong and that he's very sorry, and essentially plead to be censured and not impeached, is an idea that House Democratic leaders strongly support, but have suggested to the White House this morning that he not do in the short term, and that in fact he wait until after he returns from his upcoming overseas trip to Israel and the Gaza Strip and do it afterwards so that it would be nearer to the actual full House vote on articles of impeachment. Their concern is if the president were to do it now, it would give Republicans far too much time in the next several days to criticize the president's gesture of contrition as insufficient, not going far enough. So Democrats want him to do it. They just want him to hold his fire until later in the week.
Well, Carl, fast forward then to Wednesday when he returns, because the draft being circulated, you said not something he would say. Does he actually address the issues of perjury and lying? Because it doesn't sound to me from stories I'm hearing that moderate Republicans simply want more contrition.
Right. Word on Capitol Hill is that the president was none too pleased that some of his aides were circulating a possible apology to the country again last night. And as to admitting anything that could result in a criminal prosecution after he leaves office, it's evidently clear that the president's legal advisors want no part of that strategy. But there are some of these moderate Republicans who believe that the president has to admit that he committed perjury in order for them to vote not to impeach him. To that end, some House Democratic leadership sources have suggested that what the president should do is invite some of those moderate Republicans and some of the conservative Democrats who have suggested that they might be willing to vote for impeachment down to the White House, and in advance of any censure alternative ever coming to a vote, essentially agree that the president would be willing to pay some sort of a fine, sign a piece of paper, or perhaps give some public acknowledgement that he had agreed to a fine, and that this taking place before the articles of impeachment vote and before any censure alternative was formally considered, that would give these wavering Republican moderates and the hardened Democrats who are inclined to vote for impeachment enough cover so that they could say, look, if he's willing to admit that he's going to pay a fine now, even before we vote, that is a contrite president.
And Carl, we were reporting earlier about Congressman Diaz-Balart talking about being campaigned, if you will, by the White House in a bit of a heavy-handed fashion. Right. What's the story behind this?
Well, the White House has acknowledged that they are making phone calls and offering up White House counsel Charles Ruff, as well as other senior advisors to the president, to have person-to-person phone calls or perhaps in-person visits to explain their case against impeachment to members of Congress. What transpired yesterday was the deputy director of the White House Office of Legislative Affairs called the office of Representative Diaz-Balart to talk to the chief of staff about disaster relief in the wake of Hurricane Mitch. And in the context of that conversation, the deputy director of White House of Congressional Legislative Affairs began talking about the president's defense and impeachment and said, hey, look, we've got White House counsel Charles Ruff here who's willing to speak to the congressman directly. Let's do that. The implication, or what the chief of staff and what Diaz-Balart's camp has inferred here, was that the president or his aides were essentially trying to attach disaster relief to a vote against articles of impeachment. They think that is totally out of bounds. it is in keeping with Republicans' assertions that the White House lobbying effort to kill impeachment has been beyond the pale and far too strong-armed in its tactics. And it has prompted Mr. Diaz-Balart to say that he will, in fact, vote for articles of impeachment. Now, he is a conservative Republican, but he had heretofore refused to say which way he would vote. And in the wake of this conversation between an administration staff and his own chief of staff, he has now hardened his position and gone public with it.
And a quick update on one more point. You're talking about beginning to commit for a vote. What about Democrats? How are those numbers shaking down?
Well, both Republican and Democratic vote counters on the Hill say that the president is very much still in the danger zone, and that's perhaps recognized by the White House as evidenced by their ongoing efforts to pick up votes one way or the other. Leadership sources for the minority say they expect as many as 8 Democrats to vote for articles of impeachment. That makes the task for the White House very, very difficult. The majority advantage right now would require the president to have 11 Republicans oppose impeachment. If 8 Democrats were to oppose impeachment, that would mean the White House needs to get 19 moderate Republicans to vote against articles of impeachment. Right now, they only have 5, with the possibility of a 6th, and maybe, if you really push those who are leaning towards it, and it's still in the undecided column, as many as 9. But that's half of what they'd need, Catherine. The president has a long way to go, and the clock is ticking.
All right, just to hint at all the activity going on outside that impeachment hearing room, Carl Cameron on the Hill, thanks very much. And we will go right back to the room after this quick break.
Walgreens is the only nationwide pharmacy that's satellite linked, so your prescription is instantly available at over 2,500 locations, whether you're commuting across town or driving across country. Now, anytime you travel the highways, byways, and main streets of America, wherever there's a Walgreens, it'll feel like you never left home. Satellite linked coast-to-coast prescription availability. Walgreens, the pharmacy America trusts.
Hey, little brother, what you eating? Condensed soup. You know, chicken and stars used to be my favorite, and then I learned to ride a two-wheeler. Come on, you're an adult now. There's a better tasting soup, Progresso chicken noodle, with all white meat chicken, bigger veggies, and seasonings with some real zip. See the difference?
Good stuff.
There's hope for you yet. Now let's talk about this shirt.
What?
Discover the better taste of Progresso.
Hi, we're in Miami. We've got a sink, new Pert Plus with clean conditioning. We're washing hair and we're changing minds. Excuse me. Hi. Excuse me, ma'am. I ask you a couple of questions. Hi, can I ask you a couple of questions about shampoo? Shampoo? Have you ever used one of those shampoo and conditioners in one? Have you ever used one of those shampoo and conditioners in one?
No. No? Yes.
What'd you think of it?
Didn't like it. I hated them. I hated them. Kind of limp and dead. Weighs your hair down.
We're 0 for 4, my friend. Look at this. I don't know what you've heard about Pert Plus in the past, but it's totally changed. And I've got a sink right over there, and I got a sink right over there. It's reformulated Pert Plus. Here we go, ladies. All right, but this stuff, since they redid it, it's been revolutionarily, redesigned and has water-based conditioning. You see, there's no buildup, so your hair's going to feel clean. Tell me what it feels like.
Wow. It's wonderful light. It feels light. It's light and it does seem lighter.
Oh, wow, that's great. Hey, new Pert Plus with clean conditioning. Fantastic. We're washing hair and we're changing minds. Excuse me. Excuse me.
As the impeachment debate continues, the fate of a president remains in question. As both sides rest their case, will the House vote to impeach? Stay with Fox News Channel for continuing coverage of the impeachment debate. The president's men and women have spoken. Now decision time. If it does come down to a full House vote, is the deck stacked against the president? And even if he's impeached, what are the odds of conviction? Get the latest buzz this weekend with the Beltway Boys. 'Cause in Washington, there's never a dull moment.
Will the president speak or won't he? We have been receiving some information the president may be set to make remarks about the hearings today. We're going to check. Well, our reporter is standing by, getting all wired in. So while we wait for him to get ready and give us an update on what's happening at the White House, he's ready now. I've just got the signal. Brian Wilson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, and
Brian,
I'm sorry for being so long.
No problem. What's the word?
Well, the basic word is, after all day long, we were hearing from the White House that the president really wasn't intending to make any further comment prior to his trip to the Middle East. It does now appear that something is up. We have been told to be prepared for a statement from the president at 4 o'clock in the Rose Garden. If Capitol. It just came down just a couple of minutes ago, and we are basically scrambling to get cameras back in position and trying to find a little bit more about what's going on. Basically, many of the president's supporters have been asking him for some time now to come out and make another statement of contrition. Another statement saying he's sorry for the things that have happened. Many people on Capitol Hill believe that if he were to do that and make a very contrite statement admitting wrongdoing in some more definitive way than he has in the past, that it would go a long way for him up on Capitol Hill. There are many people who in the last few days thought the president has been, and I don't want to use, this is not my term, their term, he has been arrogant in not admitting that he has done wrong and trying to parse statements in a legalistic way. And now what they're asking him to do is come out and say something that's a bit more contrite, a little more human, a little more admission from the White House of wrongdoing. And we're waiting to see exactly what will happen, but the suggestion is if he was going to make a statement before he departs for the Middle East, this is about the last time he would have to do so. Catherine?
Well, Brian, what sort of reaction have you got from the White House about the leaking of this draft statement last night that may have in fact called for the president to be much more forthright about perjury and possibly even lying, whether in the Jones deposition or in the grand jury? We
were told that that statement basically was something the president had not approved, had not seen, and basically they were saying that it was something that his staff people had worked up without his knowledge. There were some people on the staff clearly pushing for that, it would seem, by the release of that draft statement. We are told that probably the fact that that was released would mean that we will not see that statement, maybe something like it, but not that exact statement. So apparently the political team, which has been urging him to get out there and be more contrite, to be more human, to admit more wrongdoing, it would appear it is winning out at this hour.
Okay, well, Brian, let me get you to stand by, and we're going to go back to the Capitol Hill. Carl Cameron has some more information for us. Carl?
Hi, Catherine. Well, word that the president would offer up some sort of a gesture of contrition today comes just hours after House Democratic leaders urged the president to hold off until he returned from his overseas trip. And as we have been reporting, that news came just here to some of the Democrats closely involved with the Judiciary Committee's impeachment defense, as well as with Democratic leadership who have in fact been in contact with the White House. And they said, well, if he does it today, it may mean he'll only have to do it again when he gets back. The concern that Democrats have is that no matter how contrite the president may sound, appear, or offer to be, there will be Republicans who will still say, not enough. And we need to see more grief from the president. We need to see more appeals for leniency from the Congress, and that he would still need to do that virtually on the eve of the full House vote. So already you have Democrats here involved in the Judiciary Committee's proceedings suggesting that no matter what he does today, he may have to continue to offer his pleas for a censure and not an impeachment right up until the votes are cast.
All right, Carl Cameron on the Hill, Brian Wilson at the White House. Gentlemen, thanks very much. We're going to take another quick break, and then we'll check back in with the impeachment hearings. Don't go away.
That undermine the structure of functioning of government or undermine personal liberty. Perjury in a private sexual affair is a low crime, a serious crime, but a low crime, not a crime against the state, and ought to be prosecuted if it were provable. Although we heard a bunch of mostly Republican prosecutors the other day tell us that no reasonable prosecutor, and I presume they didn't include Mr. Starr in that category, would think of bringing a prosecution on this, on the evidence we have here, and you'd never get a conviction. But nonetheless, that's the appropriate form for this kind of alleged crime. These are not high crimes and misdemeanors under the meaning of the Constitution. But if despite that, if despite the weight of tradition, of precedent, and of scholarly opinion that these are not high crimes and misdemeanors, this committee chooses to put forward articles of impeachment, at least they ought to follow due process of law. Due process of law demands the specificity in a perjury count. Now, it doesn't demand...
This program is brought to you by Micron Electronics. New rules, new tools.
Let us celebrate this supper with merriment, with song, with crescent rolls.
Did someone forget the crescent rolls?
Don't worry, they're right here.
Warm, flaky Pillsbury crescent rolls are one Christmas tradition you don't want to forget.
Let's eat!
50,000 people are signing up for cell phone service today. You know what else? 148 million people are hooked up to the net. 7 billion emails are being sent. What's it all mean? There's a communications revolution going on, and one company is right in the middle of it all. Lucent Technologies. We make the things that make communications work.
What's the real fun of cookie making? Decorating. So leap to the fun part faster with Pillsbury. Roll it out, cut it out, then have some holiday fun with Pillsbury Sugar Cookie Dough, the fast way to a big finish.
Hi, I'm George Foreman, and this is my lean, mean, fat-reducing grilling machine. It grills delicious food in a healthy way, fast. And now I've teamed up with the folks at Sears to make my grill better than ever. Together, we've added this unique, handy warming lid, so preparing tasty meals is even easier. The great features of my grill will make meal times faster and easier in your home.
George Foreman's grill is a real time saver. Since it cooks from both sides at once, it cuts most cooking times in half. The large grilling surface lets me make enough for everyone. I use it all the time. The slanted grill channels fat and grease away from food while it cooks, right into handy trays. With the floating hinge, thick chops, chicken breast, even bacon all grill evenly. Seared on the outside, moist and flavorful inside. Meanwhile, the lid warms rolls, buns, biscuits, tortillas, even pita bread. Now we even have time for a hot breakfast. And the double-coated non-stick surface makes cleanup a breeze.
At $59.99, George Foreman's grilling machine with warming lid is a great value, and it's available only from Sears.
It even comes with a spatula that fits right into the grooves of the grill plate. I love it so much, I gave one to my mother and my brother, who was living on takeout until he discovered that even he could make a home-cooked meal. Even when I get home late, I can serve a delicious meal in minutes.
Be a champ in your kitchen. Now with this handy warming lid, available only from Sears. I'm so proud of it, I put my name on it. And because it's from Sears, you know your satisfaction is guaranteed or your money back.
Have your Sears card or other credit card ready and call 1-800-403-5588 now to order George Foreman's grilling machine with Sears exclusive warming lid. It's yours for only $59.99 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-403-5588 now.
To remind everyone, about 13 minutes from now, we've been told the president may enter the Rose Garden and make remarks about the impeachment hearings. Let's check back in with Brian Wilson there at the White House. Any further news about the content, Brian?
Catherine, we're expecting that the president will speak for about 7 to 8 minutes, we are now told. And I must tell you, this has been very tightly held information. Joe Lockhart held his afternoon briefing about 1 o'clock this afternoon and gave no indication that this was imminent, but also did not knock down reports that something might be in the works. I'll tell you how closely guarded it is. We basically first began to hear about this from the very able technicians that work here at the White House who had an inkling that something was up in the Rose Garden. We called, we asked if it was true, we were told no. We were told no 3 times, and then all of a sudden an announcement over the PA system that the president was going to make some kind of statement in the Rose Garden at 4 o'clock. Of course, the anticipated statement will be something along the lines of that he is more sorry than he has been in the past. As you know, many on Capitol have been calling for a more contrite statement from the president, a statement that goes further than he has gone in the past and then admitting wrongdoing. Many people believe up on Capitol Hill that would help his cause, although it does almost seem certain that the articles of impeachment will emerge from the committee. It's still very, very close in the House. By some estimates, 3 to 5 votes either way could mean the difference between impeachment or not impeaching this president. So we're waiting with great interest to see what the president says. He, of course, doesn't have much time left before he departs for his trip to the Middle East. He's scheduled to leave out very, very early in the morning. The logistics of that departure did not allow for a statement before he left. So it's getting down to the last hours that he could make such a statement before leaving for the Middle East, and he'll be gone over the weekend, as you know.
Well, Brian, we were talking to Carl Cameron a few moments ago, and he said, in fact, congressional leaders had said, please don't make a statement before you leave. That gives the Republicans too much time to address this while you're gone. In fact, wait until Wednesday, just preceding the debate and vote that could occur on the House floor. Does this seem to indicate any sort of rift with the congressional leadership of his party?
I don't think so. I think he'll be getting a lot of advice from all sides, not not all of it, of course, in lockstep. I think that they have decided that they need to say something before they leave to see if they can perhaps clear up a few matters. Now, that does not preclude the possibility that on Wednesday night, just before the big House vote, that indeed he could make an address to the nation. That is entirely possible. Certainly not on the schedule now, but it will not be ruled out, I'm certain, by the White House, because they may want one more opportunity to address the nation and members of Congress before they cast that historic vote. So I don't think that that means that it's out. It doesn't mean that there's a rift. I just think that they are deciding that before they leave town, and basically when they're out of town, it makes it very difficult for them to respond in any way to what's going on. They want to take one more opportunity to address those members and address issues regarding this impeachment matter.
All right, Brian Wilson at the White House. And again, about 10 minutes from now, as we note the clock, the president should be going into the Rose Garden, assuming he's on time to make these remarks. Of course, we'll be there live. In the meantime, let's go back to the impeachment hearings. I think Congressman Scott is speaking. Let's listen in.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of comments as to specificity. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Nadler, that the one or more is not the problem so much as the lack of specificity itself in the underlying article. Looking at our precedents and first going to the Johnson case, there are articles and then there is specification first with the details and the word-by-word allegation of what the president was supposed to have said, and then specification second and specification third. Much has been said about the Watergate matter, and while it's true that all of the evidence was not recited in the various articles, especially in Article 2, there was much specificity in the article, and it's worth reiterating and reminding the committee that accompanying the articles was a statement of information that was very specific as to the absolute detail that was being alleged that the president had done, numbered by paragraphs with copies of the evidence. Looking at judicial, although I don't think they're precedent in terms of the standard for high crimes and misdemeanors, looking at the Hastings case, all of the articles where false statements are alleged quote the statements that are being referred to. And I do think it's important that we know what we're doing, not only for due process and notice to the president, but for notice to our colleagues who I think as early as next week will be asked to vote upon one or more articles. And I'm beginning to think that my colleague from Massachusetts is correct. We are writing the articles in this way because we do not want to admit what the issue really is. Looking at the Starr report referenced by the chairman this morning as incorporated in these articles, on page 148 is the following statement by Mr. Starr. The president's grand jury testimony contradicts Ms. Lewinsky's grand jury testimony on the question whether the president touched Ms. Lewinsky's breasts or genitalia during their sexual activity. I cannot believe that the founding fathers meant for the fate of the nation and the will of the people to fall or rise based on whether or not Ms. Lewinsky or the president's version of breasts and genitalia touching was accurate. I cannot imagine that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the Senate is going to sit and listen to the two individuals testify as to this matter. And I cannot believe that this is what we are going to be sending to our colleagues. But obviously it is, and we ought to admit it instead of trying to hide it behind the imprecise articles before us.
Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady from Houston, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, as I listen to this debate, it's quite striking to me because I remember, my memory serves me well, if I can recollect, that a couple of weeks ago when we started, I brought up the issue of the Fifth Amendment being part of the proceedings of this process to ensure that we did abide by, or be guided by, if you will, the rule of law to the extent that we recognize notice and due process. I think what the American people understand is a basic fairness. And I don't think the amendment even comes near to the question of fairness, because all it does is provide for a listing, an either or, an A, B, C, D, or E. It does not provide the specificity that is important to notice. And let me explain to the American people about this whole question, with great respect to my colleagues in 1974, of what this means when we vote out articles of impeachment. And let's just send it to the House. What is actually happening is that members who are...
As we approach the 4 o'clock hour here on the East Coast and the anticipated remarks of the president at the top of the hour, let me send our coverage down to Washington and Fox News managing editor Brett Hume. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Catherine. Thanks very much. We will await the president's entrance into the Rose Garden shortly. It has been advertised, as Catherine pointed out, at 4 o'clock. White House staff say, well, it should be about 4 o'clock. When things are gotten together quickly, it is understandable that they sometimes do not start on time, so we do not expect a 4 p.m. hard start. However, we will be prepared for one if it comes. In the meantime, we're going to take a quick look back at what has transpired so far today with my colleague Tony Snow, who joins me here in the studio. Tony, we're now debating Article 1 of this set of articles of impeachment, and so far the conversation has all been about this issue of specificity.
That's right. There's been a big to-do about Republicans being specific about which comments they think were false, misleading, and perjurious, to lay them out, to put them within the article of impeachment itself. Republicans have been responding by saying, now, wait a minute. This is a different set of rules than were applied in 1974. I happen to have that report with me right here. And as a matter of fact, the articles of impeachment have a whole series of charges, but the supporting document is contained elsewhere in the report. And that's Republicans are saying, we're going to do the same thing you Democrats did in 1974. We'll lay out charges, they're general, and then we'll have the specifics in other exhibits.
Right. Well, it seems likely that that this kind of thing, if the Democrats choose to argue the point, can drag out a kind of an amendment process, point of information process, parliamentary process, for quite a long time. The history of these things in legislative situations is that they tend to drag into the night. At some point, everybody gets tired and the votes begin to occur rapidly. One wonders if that will occur here.
Well, one of the old parliamentary maneuvers, you and I were talking about it earlier today, is having a member say, I want to delete the last word.
Strike the last word.
They just strike the last word. It doesn't mean anything. No. It merely is a maneuver for stopping, putting up what may seem to be an amendment.
Well, it is the standard way during floor debate on legislation that a member is recognized to speak for 5 minutes. And it is within the parliamentary practice of the House that when a member asks to strike the last word is never stricken. It is simply a parliamentary device. Now, in addition to this wrangling over the Article 1, which it seems likely will pass in whatever form the Republicans decide they want it to, simply because they have the votes. There is the question of how well the White House, and you heard Catherine discussing this earlier, and House Democrats are getting along as they seek to coordinate strategy to try to save the president from this fate. Our Carl Cameron is standing by on Capitol Hill. Carl, you had mentioned earlier in the day that senior House Democratic leaders had urged the president to wait until after his return from the Middle East, where he goes tomorrow morning, to make an appeal. How did this decision to go ahead at 4 o'clock this afternoon go down there?
Not well, but the House Democratic leadership has become accustomed to the Clinton White House, choosing not to heed their advice. The concern from Democrats was that no matter how contrite, apologetic the president might sound in his remarks, now expected just a few minutes from now, it would be insufficient to persuade some of the undecided Republicans to vote against articles of impeachment. And because it would be delivered today, or perhaps tomorrow, but now we know in just a few moments, it would give Republicans the opportunity to attack the president's remarks as not substantial enough, not apologetic enough while he's out of the country, and that it wouldn't persuade the Republicans. So they said, wait until you come back, time it on the eve or within the last 24, 36 hours before the actual full House votes, thereby get the most bang for your buck. And when they heard that the president's going to do it today, there was sort of this exasperated, he did it again to us, demeanor from some of the leadership aides and sources here on the Hill. And they said, well, all this means is he'll probably have to do it again when he gets back from overseas.
Well, Carl, I rather suspect that the president, under these circumstances, getting, as Catherine had earlier suggested, or in the colloquy suggested, much conflicting advice on this point. There is sometimes a feeling among White House aides and other advisors to this president, who is, after all, a very gifted speaker and a very persuasive person, that when the president's not out defending himself, that they're leaving their best ammunition, their best weapon in the barn, so to speak. And so let's go down to the White House and ask Jim Angle, our senior White House correspondent, what is this going to be is this likely to be another contrite speech, Jim? And we heard it's going to be about process. What are we expecting here?
Well, the White House doesn't want to say what exactly the president will do in this speech. They are saying it is that they felt it was necessary because the process is unfolding on Capitol Hill. The president's going to be out of the country for 4 days. They felt it was necessary for him to say something at this point. You are quite right. There's a lot of conflicting advice and a lot of conflicting opinions even inside the White House, with some people believing it was too early for the president to speak, others worrying that it was too late, that people were getting locked in, that they were beginning to solidify in their positions, and that the president was losing an opportunity to influence those decisions. He has not called the undecided Republicans, though obviously the White House has stepped up its PR effort to push the president's view on Capitol Hill, and there was some concern that he might just be waiting too long, that if he came in at the last minute, it would simply be too late for some of these people. You know, in politics, as some people say, impressions are like clay. Once they harden, it is very difficult to change them. That was the fear that prompted this speech today. We do not know how far the president will go in being contrite, how far he will go in admitting that he lied. None of the White House people that we talked to were willing to get into that, and I doubt if very many of them actually know. I can tell you that there was a flurry of reports last night and a speech leaked to MSNBC. The White House quickly came out to tell us that that was not something that had ever crossed the president's desk. He had not seen that, and one aide suggested that this speech will be very different from that one.
That draft, if that's what it was quite contrite. It must be very difficult for the president's advisors and the president himself to be able to kind of figure out what to say to persuade a group of people whose identities are not entirely clear, because nobody seems to know exactly where the votes are. We've seen, Jim, efforts made apparently to persuade a couple of members, Lincoln Diaz Ballard of Florida being the most recent case, where somebody probably trying to be helpful, talking to him about Hurricane Mitch relief, brought up the subject of impeachment and offered up Charles Ruff, the president's counsel, to answer any questions, and Ballard took offense, and next thing you know, he's off the fence and is in favor of impeachment. It must be very difficult. They must feel like they're boxing in the dark down there.
Well, I would think so. I would doubt very seriously if Diaz-Balart made the decision to vote on impeachment based on that call. In fact, the White House
didn't help, though.
May not have helped, but all they did was call to let him know that they were announcing some hurricane relief today at the White House. It was the kind of courtesy that you see every day. The problem was that the discussion about impeachment took place in the same call, and some offense was obviously taken there. The White House has had a great deal of difficulty figuring out what it was doing. As you suggest, shadow boxing at best here, trying to figure out who had which position at which point. Obviously, it is critical for the president to get some of the wavering Republicans, some of the moderate Republicans, to go with him. It has been very, very difficult for them to figure out where the game was at any given moment. It has changed so rapidly on Capitol Hill. This is obviously an attempt to make things a little better for the president, and I would say a recognition in the White House that things are not going the president's way.
Yeah, that seems that if they decided to come out today in the face of advice from Democratic leaders on Capitol Hill that the president should wait, it would suggest that there's some feeling of concern that the situation may not be improving. Now, we're waiting, of course, Jim, for the official 2-minute warning, and while we do that, let me go back just for a moment, if I can, to Carl on Capitol Hill. Carl, you were saying earlier that the House Democratic leaders now suspect or expect that they could lose as many as 8 from their number to vote for impeachment. Now, we have identified, Carl, I believe you've identified 4 members who are going to vote for impeachment, 3 whose names you know, 1 who is asked to remain anonymous so far. Do you really believe that they think they'll lose 8?
No, as is always the case when there is a big vote, perhaps historical precedent of playing the high ball, low ball expectations game in impeachment doesn't necessarily apply, but that is the high-end number, the worst-case scenario, and when they say 8, it is likely that they are probably anticipating 4 or 5.
Right.
The idea being anything that comes under what their estimate is would be perceived as a victory.
Well, it is the small number, perhaps, but it is terribly important, I suppose, Carl, because we're talking about trying to pull votes from the other side, and there's about 15 to 20 that they believe are eligible possible votes, and if you lose, every one you lose on your side means one more Republican you have to gain to make up for it.
Right.
Obviously, that Democratic number, if it were to go to 8, would make this a very tall order indeed.
And what has been happening for the last 2 days or so is that the pool of undecided moderate Republicans that the president and the administration are so focused on has been shrinking. But by about a 3-to-1 margin, it has been shrinking in a way that the president would probably not be too pleased by. In other words, those moderate Republicans have been coming out and saying that they're going to vote for impeachment today. 3 more of the moderate Republicans that we had identified as undecided announced or are about to announce that they will vote for impeachment.
Carl, name those 3
Sure,
for us.
it's Jack Metcalf of Washington, Richard Baker of Louisiana, and Charlie Norwood of Georgia. They had quite publicly said for the last week or so that they weren't going to make up their minds until the Judiciary Committee concluded its work. And just this morning, in conversations with Fox, they have confirmed, in fact, that they plan to vote for articles of impeachment.
Now, would you regard any of those, Carl? You know the territory up there. Would you regard any of those as a real surprise?
Well, Jack Metcalf of Washington is a question mark. He is a gentleman who has had some friendly dealings with the White House before. In the case of Charlie Norwood, that's not so much of a surprise. But in all of these cases, these are Republicans that were identified by Democrats on the Hill as well as at the White House for people that they could potentially pick off because either the president had beaten Bob Dole in their congressional districts or that these were moderate Republicans with either social or fiscal policies and ideologies that they had sometimes been in line with the administration and that they were sort of ripe for the taking and they are falling off the tree and not into the president's yard. As to what many of those moderate Republicans hope the president does is not just apologize, but what they really want to do is hear the president say, please don't impeach me, give me a censure. They want to hear the president ask for a lesser penalty. And
wouldn't that have a kind of a throw me in the briar patch kind of a quality to it?
It could be horrible. The idea that the president would ask for a particular punishment
makes it sound like
devastating.
Makes it sound like weak punishment.
And there's a Sophie's choice aspect about this. A lot of the moderate Republicans are saying, look, we want the president to admit that he committed perjury, and if he admits to a crime, then we won't vote to impeach him. It's a terrible box for the president to find himself.
Well, I must say I wouldn't want to be the president's lawyer trying to advise him in a situation where his political survival may depend upon his admitting something that if it that it could lead to his indictment when he leaves office. That is not what you call a good situation for the president to be in, or for one trying to advise him legally.
And there are some Democrats who have suggested that those types of propositions from Republicans are completely disingenuous because they're asking the president to do something that he absolutely can't.
Now, Carl, tell us about the case of John Porter of Illinois. Mr. Porter, of course, is a moderate Republican who had been identified as someone who was undecided or opposed impeachment.
Yes.
What's the deal with him?
Well, another one of the members that Fox has been in contact with periodically for the past 2 weeks, and up until the beginning part of this week, he was identified by us as a definite Republican vote against articles of impeachment, one of the ones that the president was pleased to hear about. And in the beginning of this week, he began to backpedal a little bit and issued a statement yesterday saying that he was undecided and, in fact, would stay undecided until such time as the Judiciary Committee voted on articles of impeachment and it came to the House floor. There have been widespread reports of Republicans on the fence who have gotten these allegedly strong-arm tactic phone calls from friends close to the administration. And Mr. Porter had received a phone call from a prominent business person in his community who told him that he was calling because he'd gotten word from pals of the president and suggested that Mr. Porter should vote against impeachment and get back off the fence. Mr. Porter
has someone having to do with fundraising?
Well, yes. A business person in the congressman's Illinois congressional district who is known to give contributions to members of both parties and have great influence over political contributions in congressional politics in that part of Illinois. Right. So when Mr. Porter got this phone call, he took that to be an implicit threat that his campaign contributions could dry up if he weren't to vote in a way that would be desirable by the administration.
All right. Carl, thanks very much. Let's take a quick look inside the committee room where the debate over this first article of impeachment is continuing, but a number of members have left the room, as you can see from that sort of high shot there.